and ask you guys to begin the process of getting to know one another a little bit better by doing introductions. And what I have on the screen are some things that I actually think we'd like to hear everybody contribute to. So this is more than my name is Doug. I grew up in Salt Lake City. I went to college in California, New York, and Wisconsin, and I'm a sociologist, and I've been here since 2001. That's fine. You can do that. But I'd like to hear more pointedly what kinds of things you've done relative to things that are water-related, that might be related to our topic. So what kind of projects have you been involved with? Have you ever been involved with team work, team science, this kinds of things that sound familiar that I just described to you? And how did it go? Have you, if you're a natural scientist, what's your experience working with social scientists, and vice versa? I think most of us are going to be easy here because we've all largely worked with one another. And then what's our experience working with people outside the university on science projects? Do we have any experiences and insights we'd like to share? So with that, I could pick on Rob, the big person behind the curtain. If I can get my, how do you make this thing come back on? There it is. If I can figure out how to make Rob come to life. There you are. Can you see the list of things to talk about still?
Well, yeah, except for the transmission hasn't been particularly good with the computer monitor. So I can see what I'm see what I'm supposed to talk about, but I'd rather see you guys if you can switch back to that and see if the reception on my end is better.
Can you see it? Could you have the choice to pick to see us while we still see you? I've told that is possible, but
I don't know. Good question. I'm not sure that I know. There, okay, so now, all right, that's much better because now that's not so good. Whatever you're doing to make the computer screen visible, that's not a good connection, and the video is not good.
For a second?
It was much better when I could see the whole room. Yeah, that's much better. For some reason,
good. It's much better now.
Okay, yeah, the transmission of the computer images was not very clean, Doug. But
okay.
So I've been picked on. You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Rob Van Kirk, and currently I'm a professor at Humboldt State University out here in California. I teach mostly applied statistics courses to fisheries, wildlife, biology, and natural resource majors, mostly advanced undergrads and graduate students. But I've only done that for a couple years. I have strong ties to Utah. I did my PhD at the University of Utah in mathematics, actually, mathematical biology to be specific, but applied mathematics kind of in general. And then I spent 4 years as the research director for a nonprofit group in southeastern Idaho. You've probably heard of it, the Henry's Fork Foundation. And I was one of the early founding members of the Henry's Fork Watershed Council, which has been in existence now since, formally since 1994. And I organized the very first annual State of the Watershed Conference that group still holds every November. I haven't been able to be there the last few years, but and then after 4 years at the Henry's Fork Foundation, I spent I guess 9 years on the faculty at Idaho State University in Pocatello, and interacted with many of you in the room there, or some of you anyway, over that time period, and have been here at Humboldt State for a little over 2 years, and am hoping someday, not in the not too distant future, to make my way back to the Intermountain West. But for now, I'm here. So that's the stuff Doug said to say at the beginning. So I just said all that stuff. So experience with water resources related research. I don't have any formal training in this. As I said, I went to University of Utah, did my PhD there in mathematics in a mathematics department, and learned a bunch of math. But at the Henry's Fork Foundation, that water resources was central to what I did. So in the 4 years I was there, pretty much everything I did, including establish the research program at the Henry's Fork Foundation, was water related. It was highly motivated by fisheries management interest. You know, the Henry's Fork Foundation initially was formed by a group of avid people, fly fishermen who fished the Henry's Fork of the Snake River in Idaho, and their interest was in making the fishing better. It was pretty straightforward, but I think I was successful in convincing them that that hydrologic regime and water management was probably the single biggest thing that was a factor determining their angling experience. And so necessarily then most of what we did at the Henry's Fork Foundation was centered around water management. And after 4 years there, we had compiled quite a list of publications, and some Utah State researchers were involved in some of that research that's gotten published, and that was in the late 90s, mid to late 90s when I did that. And then I took that program to Idaho State with me, and I have that same program here, and I work on a variety of everything I do is related to water in some way, whether it's fisheries or aquatic ecology or actual, hydrologic analysis, the hardcore hydrology. So pretty much everything I do is related to water in some way. Team-oriented research, I've been involved in a lot of, what we would describe, I guess, according to Doug's model that he just presented, either disciplinary, of course, or probably more multidisciplinary is probably what I'm most familiar with, where, as Doug said, you have the social scientist, and you have the ecologist and the hydrologist, and a lot of times I'm the statistician or the modeler or something. So I have a fair amount of experience with that sort of traditional thing that we're all interested in, the parallel tracks. I'm currently project director on a 3-year project funded by U.S. Department of Agriculture that I would describe more towards the interdisciplinary. I think we've tried really hard. We tried in the grant proposal and in the work we're doing to try and, at least as Doug said, blur the lines a little bit. And I get to blur them the most of anybody because I'm not trained in any of the disciplines that I work in. I mean, I'm a mathematician, so I'm not an ecologist and not a sociologist and not a hydrologist and not anything. So when I do a little bit of everything, I'm at least blurring the lines. And the current project that we're working on has objectives that read very similarly to the ones that we're developing for this project here. And it's designed to look at the effect of land and water use and management changes on hydrology and, sort of in a cyclical fashion, back on water management in an irrigated watershed, which is the Henry's Fork watershed, where I've been working for the last 15 years. So in that project, again, I have my sort of multidisciplinary team. Again, I've been trying to blur the boundaries as much as possible, and I guess I'll maybe save details. I think I'm scheduled to give a presentation here in November, and I will be in Logan in person on that day, so that'll be a little more satisfying than this arrangement. But the main goal there is to look at exactly those things that Doug was mentioning. If we change irrigation efficiency, if we take land out of agricultural production and replace it with subdivisions, if we tweak the dam a little bit and let a little more flow out this time of the year and a little less flow out some other time of the year, how does that affect ecological systems? How does it affect downstream and down gradient water users? How does it affect the allocation of water rights? All of those things that Doug mentioned are components of the project I'm working on. And I must say that one of the main hydrologic emphases in our particular project is interaction between groundwater and surface water. And I'll be really interested to learn about that aspect of what goes on in Cache Valley, because in Idaho it just hits you over the head because we have such highly permeable aquifers that a lot of water goes in and out of aquifers on relatively short time scales, so that we as humans can look at it and visualize it, which is very difficult for a lot of people who are not hydrogeologists to actually see water going into the ground and coming out of the ground on sort of meaningful time scales. As far as working with people outside the university, my whole research program has always been collaborative, primarily with government agencies, and so not just agency folks as managers, but as actually researchers. So I've done a lot of work with Idaho Department of Fish and Game and biologists who work for Idaho Fish and Game, work with the Bureau of Reclamation and their hydrologists, and so I do have quite a few projects where people from outside the university, and not in the research branches of these agencies, by the way. I mean the folks who are in regional and district offices out in the field. Those folks have been research collaborators of mine. I've got lots of joint publications with researchers in positions outside the university, and that does include some people in the nonprofit sector. I've done a lot of work with non-governmental organizations, the Nature Conservancy, Trout Unlimited, and some more local and regional organizations. And some of those organizations have staff scientists. Of course, I was one of those at the Henry's Fork Foundation at one time. So I do have a lot of experience involving people from outside a university setting as research collaborators, and not as what we might traditionally call stakeholders. But I am very fascinated about this concept of bringing the stakeholders in to do the science. I must admit I have not really done that yet, and I'm very fascinated by that possibility. So I think does that answer all those questions?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
We have two options as we go around. I can try putting you on the room on the microphones, and you tell me if it's too noisy, because you're the one who's going to suffer.
Okay.
I've got this portable microphone we can hand around, but let me see if the room mic works, if I can remember how. I can at least show you us. You see us?
Yeah, that's good. The view's good now.
Toggle on off using the touch panel student mic mute button.
Student mic. Okay, there you go. You guys have student mic. So, what's that like for you? Can someone talk out there? And
Yeah, somebody
David?
talk.
David, can you?
Sure. How's it going there?
Good. That works.
Okay. Why don't you try that, and then we can use this as backup. So, what?
I have a timing thought. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lorian Belton. I work a lot with Terry Messmer, but I also work with Doug. And pretty much what I find myself doing is helping people run meetings and being a kind of process design expert for these kinds of collaborative meetings in and outside the university. So, just to legitimize my saying, if we're running till 3:15.
Some people have to leave early, I know, but
Okay.
who has to leave early? We can start with you.
Right. We'll definitely start with those folks.
Does anyone have to leave before 3:15?
If I go first, then maybe I get up and...
No. That was a good try.
That was a fair question. Completely fair question. So there are approximately 14 people in the room, and we have 45 minutes left, which basically means we only get about 3 minutes each, assuming that we don't want to have to do anything else at the end of the discussion. Is that okay? So 3 minutes goes by pretty quickly, so we'll have to either have fast talkers or just find a way within this medium to further these discussions. Obviously.
I'll actually take a different tack.
But
I think
given-
we should allow more time, and if we don't get done today, we have more sessions.
Okay.
And I'd rather get 5-minute version or the 6-minute version, then just hear your name and affiliation and move on. And then expect that it's worth it to people to come back and keep hearing. But we'll eventually be a self-selected group that can tolerate one another and can find this time to be worthwhile. And there's some people I know that intend to be here that couldn't be here today for reasons that it got scheduled just recently, but hopefully we're on their calendar on future Fridays. And they'll be asked to watch it on a small screen on their computer. So why don't we go ahead and just start and see how far we go. And I'm going to play with the camera so I can zoom in on you. Well, for him, you don't have to. I can try to get it off our screen so we don't have to watch it. But we started with David, so why don't we just keep going, David?
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Rob?
Yeah, I can. Just great.
So I'm David Rosenberg in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Most of my research involves systems analysis, which is mathematical modeling of water systems using simulation and optimization modeling for the most part, and also a lot of data management. And by water systems, this can be everything from individual users, such as households or farms, city water distribution systems, or regional or transboundary systems. One of the cool things about systems modeling is the math is really the same regardless of what spatial scale you're working at. What were some of the other things you wanted us to talk about?
Experience?
Okay. Or experience, collaboration, some other areas of water research. Maybe I can, I've been involved in water conservation projects, water supply demand modeling. A new area of research for me now is water management for environmental purposes. We do drought planning, a lot of reservoir operations. So kind of, it's just kind of seems to be all over the water resources map. For the most part, a lot of my research has been either very disciplinary specific, meaning we were doing a lot of the things that we needed to do as an individual team, but because these areas are very broad and encompassing, meant we had to put on the hat of someone else to figure out that component. We weren't necessarily working with people with expertise in those areas. I've also more recently, since I've come here to Utah, been involved in some interdisciplinary projects, both on wetlands, water management, and also in the water conservation area. As far as stakeholders, they've really been central to most of my research, and central in the sense of they've often had good problems, identified good problems, and also had funding to work on those problems. And it's always interesting to learn new perspectives to see how approaches that we're taking, whether they really resonate with what we're presumably trying to serve by working on those problems. So I really see that as central. I've worked individually with homeowners in Jordan, in the Middle East, doing interviews in their houses, looking at what water supply and conservation actions they're up to, with water utility managers, canal operators, and also the heads of water agencies or ministers as well. Also a lot of water conservation coordinators that has been worked with Joanna that we've been involved with over the last year as well throughout the state. So I think that gives a pretty good overview.
Cool.
I'm Francisco Suero. I got my master's in water resources at Utah State. I've been working with David Rosenberg. The work I've been doing is on water conservation and how to help the utility companies to approach the houses that save more water instead of giving a broad approach to the whole community. Just working on trying to reduce demand and the way we can postpone more expensive investments as expanding infrastructure. Before coming here, I worked mostly in project management for construction. So this is my first experience in water resources.
My name is Joanna Interwada. I'm in the College of Natural Resources. I actually came out of an interdisciplinary program. My PhD is from the program in comparative culture at UC Irvine. And I had an anthropologist, a sociologist, an economist, a political scientist, and a historian on my committee. So in terms of interdisciplinarity, I came out of an interdisciplinary program that was at a school of social science. And then I came into a position in a college of natural resources. So I think I've always been appreciative of the challenges of pressing disciplines. My main area of focus is natural resource and environmental policy. My research is mostly in the western United States and mostly on water. In terms of working with stakeholder groups, I've worked on a lot of interdisciplinary research projects, like Doug has done as the social scientist or policy person. And in terms of working with stakeholders, probably the two instances that stand out is I've chaired two boards for the state of Utah. One, in the late 90s, we had a task force that looked at timber harvesting on private lands, resulted in state legislation with the State Forest Practices Act, and also resulted in the landowner extension program being established at Utah State University. And then I chaired the Fish Health Policy Board for the state of Utah for 8 years. And so I think those have been interesting experiences to get a little bit more insight into policy making and working with stakeholder groups. I'm taking Lorian's lead. I'm doing the short version. I think that was
Joanna,
Very good.
what do you call yourself?
a natural resource social scientist, policy person. Now you
That fit on your
laugh.
business card?
You laugh, but if policy isn't based on understanding the human behavior behind it, it's ineffective. So I really think that there's a strong connection between understanding human behavior and understanding policy. So, I mean, that's a big question. Those are the courses and the roles that I've played, and my students are all in the Human Dimensions of Ecosystem Science and Management degree program in environment and society. But I think, I've been trained to think in interdisciplinary terms, so it's something that, but I understand the challenges.
Cool.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I'm Selena's graduate student. I'm interested in water policy, specifically policies for reality.
I muted Rob, so if he told us if he could hear you, he can't tell.
Oh, okay, sorry about that.
Are you still able to hear, Rob?
Yes.
You're getting to the back of the
Okay,
room.
I won't
know
talk
you
long,
might-
so. Okay, so I have my master's degree in geology, so I have experience working with physical scientists in that respect, but it was very disciplinary. In terms of interdisciplinary experience, I have maybe one in my master's program. I was in a program where we worked with teachers, and we were in cohorts with teachers, scientists, and also education specialists. So that's probably the greatest extent that I've had experience working in an interdisciplinary team. So I'll be interested in seeing how this plays out.
What was your name again?
Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa Welsh.
I'm Eve Davies. I know a few of you in this room. I got a master's degree here from Utah State. That's probably the last time I really got to do my own research. Now I tag along on other people's programs. So the interdisciplinary work that I actually work for the power company. It's weird but true. My title is principal scientist, but what I really do is I manage land. I manage land for hydro resources all throughout Utah and Idaho, basically. But my interest here is on the Bear River. I do a lot of work here in Cache Valley. Still, I manage Cutler Marsh, and I work on most of the environmental and land management issues on our projects on the Bear River and also on the Henry's Fork, Rob. In fact, we work some with Henry's Fork Foundation up in our projects in Idaho, in the Ashton and St. Anthony area. We do a lot of interdisciplinary work, I think, because there aren't very many scientists kicking around the power company. So I work with internally with our engineers, water managers, and I don't know, people that manage the power company. But also we have a lot of interdisciplinary team type interactions with the stakeholder groups that I work with on implementing licenses, working on TMDLs, so with water quality issues at most of our projects, those are issues that arise. So sort of, I guess, we break into a whole bunch of different pieces of water policy management, everything from science of water quality and ecology of land management and large-scale reclamation and restoration projects, dare I use the word, and then also on water use. Where does that water go? How does it run through our system? What are the controls on those systems? And that's something I'm still learning a lot about from Claudia.
Up for an intro. My name's Claudia Condor, and I work for Pacific Corp, which is also known as Rocky Mountain Power, so Eve and I are colleagues. My position with the power company is water rights administrator, so I work mostly with water rights that the company holds and manages for generation of its power through hydroelectric systems and steam generation. Yeah, I'm going to keep this short too. I don't have a lot of interdisciplinary experience. I tag along a lot with Eve and others in our company who deal with water issues for our operations. And I feel I'm an outsider here, it seems. I'm not from the academia side, but I'm happy to be here.
What's your name again?
Claudia Condor.
Claudia?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
I'm presuming he can hear me through that mic. Is that all right?
Yeah.
My name's Bob Fotheringham. I did graduate from Utah State. Got a bachelor's in civil and environmental engineering. I'm a licensed engineer and surveyor. Most of my career I spent with the Division of Water Rights, which is the state engineer's office for the state of Utah. In that capacity as regional engineer, I did work with a lot of stakeholders, creating distribution systems, worked with the Bear River Technical Advisory Committee, worked with groups like Love Bear Lake, Bear Lake Preservation Advisory, worked with dam restoration, did create a couple of distribution systems, and when you have stakeholders and you're dealing with water, you've got some pretty intensely involved stakeholders. So, yeah, in the distribution of the Bear River, did work with the states of Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, and people who use water, industry, municipalities, lots of different interests to create a distribution system on the Bear River that would work for the three states. And so I've dealt quite a bit with stakeholders. I don't know that I've dealt with a lot of interdisciplinary science necessarily. I've worked with a lot of the people in the room.
How has the university played a role when you were serving as regional engineer? Did the university play a role in your work in the past?
Our office was in the research park, and the state engineer's office did. I mean, we were part of your university system as far as where we were located.
Right.
But the university did do a lot of studies for the office itself, not necessarily for the regional office, but the state engineer's office used a lot of extension services for preparing depletion estimates, those kinds of things. So I did have a lot of contact with the university, a lot of contact with Bob Hill, extensions, those kinds of things. So, yeah, when we had issues we needed addressed, we could come to the university and they'd help us out. We had a pretty good connection with the Water Research Lab, Mac McKee over there, and others there to help us out when we had need to look at something more in depth than we normally would. So, yeah, we had some pretty good relationships up here. Okay.
My name is Xing Mingjing. I'm from Watershed Sciences. Actually, I'm working on the regional climate modeling. Use a computer model to simulate and predict current and future climate. I worked a lot of how climate affect water resources in the western United States. Actually, that's my key focus. How climate change affect snowpack, surface flow, even groundwater. This kind of research. Before I worked with some biologists, ecologists, hydrologists, these people, but I never worked with social science. This is the first time I worked with social science. I didn't know how to get in, so that's I'm interested. I'm excited about this opportunity to see how social sciences solve this kind of issues. Also I never worked with even before I didn't know what a stakeholder means, so then Jack Schmidt told me. That's why, so this is a very new experience for me. It's an exciting opportunity for me.
I want to take a quick detour and throw something on the screen that I meant to throw on the screen a while ago. And let me see if this works. Hi, Rob.
Yes.
That wasn't what I was going to throw on the screen. That's not it either.
Having way too much fun up there, Doug.
How do I send the computer screen back? There we go. All right. This is the picture we had in our grant of how we thought of a water system. And this is something we're going to have to return to repeatedly. But the mention of climate makes me realize something that I wanted to bring up. And that's that we were talking a lot of scales. There are sort of macro forcers in the world that are going to go on with or without us, kind of set the stage, if you will. And we were looking at a bunch of connections in a water system, this conceptually, as including some things that occur at a field scale, but at a watershed scale, interactions between a human system, if you will, a hydrologic system and an ecological system. And that these are all, in my mind, they are the watershed system. They're all equally important parts of how it functions. They're all interwoven and inextricably linked. So you can't do ecology really without understanding these others and vice versa. So we drew these little arrows to represent the connections among them. And then we also look at, for example, when you do human dimensions work, what happens in a watershed is heavily constrained by water law, by markets, by demographic change that often occurs from outside. And so while the behavior of these water managers and decision makers that affect the dynamics of the system occurs locally, it's heavily influenced by, you have to understand this connection. The same would be true in understanding the hydrology. It's virtually impossible to imagine doing it without understanding, in macro geoscience, how the hydrology is affected certainly by climate or regional and global scale processes that help influence what the hydrologic resources are that get to be manipulated. Because as climate changes, and when we've talked, you've worked both at this scale, in other words, how you take regional scale stuff and link it to local phenomena, but also ways in which irrigation systems, the management of irrigation systems influence local climate. And so like your California work you talked to me about is partly about understanding these other feedbacks as you move to different irrigation systems that affects literally precipitation patterns in a local and regional scale. And so as we go forward, one of the things I'm going to try to do is find at least sessions that we can do this fall that might focus on some of these nexuses, some of these arrows that connect these boxes, and have speakers that are designed to try to address the work that happens maybe here, but as it straddles a boundary as well. And we can pick different boundaries different days. So I meant to show that before we got done today, and since probably won't have time to do anything else. Let's go back now to the student cam. There we are.
How's the sound quality working?
How's it working for you, Rob? Sound-wise?
Don't have the room view yet. I still got your computer screen.
So you're just really lucky. I've
Yeah,
got
I
it
can
up
see.
here.
Yeah, I'm just looking at all the files that are in your folder there.
Yeah. I'll keep hitting buttons till something happens.
There you go.
That works
Uh-oh.
for you?
There it is right there. Whatever you, nope. Seems to be toggling back and forth.
It is.
We're
I
on
keep
the
hitting buttons.
Yeah,
I'm
you
trying to
had
get
it there a couple times.
I can't, because I see something different now on here and here. It's just driving me nuts.
And it's different on the back screen, too.
Yeah, the back screen is the same thing I'm looking at. This is the system we're supposedly, that I thought was what we're sending to Rob. So what do you see now, Rob?
Oh, I
What's big
see
on the screen?
fall winter workshop series projection.
Sorry about that.
Well, I can see what we're doing.
There you go.
Now do you see us?
No.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Self view?
What if I turn off the computer?
Well, now.
Whatever you pushed when you put that diagram up. Can you unpush that?
There we go.
I don't know what happened, but I pushed the
Okay,
button.
don't touch anything.
Going away from the podium.
Step away from the podium.
All right, cam control. I got cam control. So we flip over Charles. We're doing introductions, by the way, Michelle. Michelle just walked in. Okay. You get your chance in a minute once you get a sense of what's happening.
My name is Charles Sims. I'm from the Applied Economics Department. My background originally was in forestry. Started off in biology and forest ecology, and then kind of relate to Joanna's multi-word title that she had before, and started to evolve more into economics as time progressed. Most of what I do now is resource economics and environmental economics. I'm trying to take back up to that diagram we had from that connection between the macro scale to the connection between markets and ecology, kind of where I like to stay now. My current research is dealing a lot with modeling insect populations in forests and looking at how forest management is affecting, for instance, this pine beetle outbreak that we see in the West right now. So that's where I am now to kind of give you an idea. But the only real water research that I've done in the past has been looking at coal bed methane drilling in Wyoming and what they do with the water when they're finished with their coal bed methane drilling. So the economic and the ecological impacts of that. But I mean, most everything that kind of my focus has been more interdisciplinary work, even though my experience with interdisciplinary work has generally been natural scientists run some simulations and then give the economist a model and then he spits out a cost number or something. So I'm looking forward to trying to do something other than just that simple kind of, here's some numbers, tell us what this cost us type of thing. Work with stakeholders. Actually, when I was in Tennessee, I did a lot of non-market valuation type of stuff. So we would go and interview recreationists at recreation areas to get a value for what they placed on a certain area in the context of trying to develop very rural parks and natural or recreation areas for recreation-based tourism development in rural areas. So I worked with a whole bunch of actual recreationists and then city councilmen and local business owners and whatnot to try to get those things going in rural areas. But yeah, my work with water at this point has been somewhat limited. So.
I'm David Stevens. I'm with the Water Lab and Civil and Environmental Engineering. I've been here since '86, and since then I've been pretty much doing all water. So I'm as wet as it gets. I'm a water quality person, and so I work quite a bit with people like Jeff and Beth on water quality modeling and monitoring and total maximum daily load assessments and waste load allocations and the impacts of reservoir operations on water quality for drinking water. I'm a member of the State Drinking Water Board, and I'm a member of the State Water Treatment Operators Certification Commission, so that kind of bookends my involvement with state stakeholders. I've been working recently being since 2004 or so, with Doug Jackson Smith, Nancy Messner. I've worked with Terry Glover in economics, Arthur Kaplan in economics. And so my involvement with, I would probably call it more of a multidisciplinary type thing, because we kind of stayed in our little camps more than we probably should have. But I've had, and those are on projects related to best management practices for non-point source pollution prevention, on enhanced monitoring systems for water quality loading into lakes and reservoirs and streams, and issues related to pollution trading, to try to use market forces to improve water quality. Short and sweet.
I'm Phaedra Booty. I'm in watershed sciences as well. I'm a fisheries ecologist. I'm trained as an aquatic ecologist, but most of my research is in fisheries these days. I would say that about 2/3 of my research is addressing limiting factors of fluvial fish populations, native fishes, fish conservation in rivers. And the other 1/3 or 1/4 is in food web dynamics and predator-prey interactions in large reservoirs in the West. I work a lot at the interface between anthropogenic impacts on these aquatic systems and how those effects transfer to fish. So I'm pretty wet too. Not all wet, but pretty wet. What was the next? Interdisciplinary science. I've done a lot of things that I would have liked to have said were interdisciplinary science, but I realize now that they were mostly parallel play. And I've worked with a lot of other scientists, but they've been more like me than they've been not like me. And so, like Jameen and I have not worked much with social scientists. To be honest, I've always thought they were a little odd. So I'm looking forward to changing my mind. Well, be honest, right?
So good.
I've worked in some big stakeholder multidisciplinary processes that over topics that were very controversial and heated. I worked on the whether or not the dams on the Snake River should be breached, with a whole bunch of physical scientists and economists and some social scientists, but we all played in our own box and came back together with our own pieces. I did a lot of stuff with stakeholders. My position here is I'm with the USGS Cooperative Utah Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit. And so we're supposed to be the direct line for doing research for the state of Utah. So I do a lot of work for the Utah Division of Wildlife Research. But I've also worked on processes like a passive stream restoration project up on Spawn Creek, which drains into Temple Fork, which goes into the Logan River, and that was very stakeholder driven and very contentious and exciting. So yeah, stakeholders, yeah.
Hand left. Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, nice. So I'm Beth Nielsen. I'm at the Water Lab and part of Civil and Environmental also. I do a lot of work with David and Jeff, as David mentioned, and I've worked on a lot of the projects that he mentioned. Over the last 5 years, my primary research has kind of drifted away from hydrological water quality modeling to more specific, looking at what happens in streams in terms of groundwater surface water interactions and how that affects in-stream processes in terms of movement of various constituents and heat transport. So in general, that's been my research topic that's separate of kind of these large-scale projects that are more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. I've worked on a lot of multi/interdisciplinary projects. I got to be kind of the person that tried to pull one of those big projects together at the end to take the physical sciences and various pieces and come up with something that was useful to actual stakeholders. A very position to hold, and I learned a lot about stakeholder needs versus the research mindset, and so I've been able to kind of stand in the middle, but I'm not going to say that I learned a lot. I'm not sure it was overly successful because there's this huge gap between research and actual on the ground needs, I think, sometimes. I have recently been involved with the Jordan River TMDL. I'm on their technical advisory committee. I've also been involved with the watershed modeling that's occurring in Salt Lake County, and I'm on their technical advisory modeling advisory committee also. So I've been kind of involved with a lot of various stakeholders in the state of Utah. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Favorite color?
My favorite color. Okay.
So I'm Jeff Horsborough. I'm at the Water Research Lab in Civil and Environmental Engineering. Excuse me. My first love is probably water quality, and that's where most of my training and background lies. But lately I've been doing a lot of work on hydrologic information systems, and that ranges from the hydrologic measurement infrastructure that we use to collect environmental data sets to the representation of those data in databases and information systems, all the way through to the software systems and computer science to synthesize data and incorporate it into models and actually make sense and use of data. So I love to geek out. I spend probably as much time with computer scientists as I do with natural scientists, although I've been known to hang out with hydrologists quite a lot. So they're just as geeky as the computer scientists, by the way. But as far as, I'll call it cross-campus work. I'm not sure where you want to put it in the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary scheme. But like Dr. Stevens and Beth talked about, we've had a couple of pre-major projects over the past 5 years. A Targeted Watersheds grant from the EPA that sponsored both water quality modeling in the Bear River Basin to support a study of the economics of water quality trading. And so there was quite a lot of work between physical scientists, engineers, economists, and then another big part of that project was the development of a watershed information system that was kind of aimed at supporting local stakeholders who were interested in water quality, and that ranged anything from agencies to high school students to whoever. And so it's a real challenge to present technical data and information to a variety of audiences. So the other project is this Little Bear River Conservation Effects Assessment Project, and I'd love to say that I worked closely with the social scientists on that project, but it mostly consisted of me sitting there listening to them talk and learning a lot and kind of nodding my head a lot.
Talk back.
And talking back, well, there's talking back and then there's talking back. But we did spend a lot of time discussing how to represent the data that they were collecting in the field, spatially in a database, and how to make sense of what it actually means and what it means in terms of water quality effects of those conservation practices that were actually put in place. So let's see. I think I covered it. Did I cover it? All right.
Yeah.
You're happy, I'm happy.
I'm happy.
I learned a ton from you too, Jeff.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Probably a lot about ice fishing, but there was some modeling information there.
Michelle, do you feel comfortable jumping in? I can give you the agenda, which is that you tell us about yourself and who you are, and then there were some discussion points that I can try to call up on the screen at risk of losing the screen forever. But they're basically, what experiences do you have working on team science and working with
people across the divide between natural and social science and the stakeholders. Those are the additional things that weren't obvious, but water-related background first.
My name is Michelle. I am on the faculty in biology, but I don't study organisms. So if you gave me an organism, I probably wouldn't know what it was. I'm an ecologist, and I study what organisms do to affect the materials that cycle in the environment. And most of my research has focused, at least since I've come to Utah State, has focused on hydrological and biogeochemical processes that affect water quality, in particular with regards to nitrogen. In terms of teamwork, if you study ecosystems, you have to really work in teams because not any one person is going to have the right expertise. So for example, if I need to understand how some snot on a rock cycles nitrogen, I need to find somebody that knows what's in that snot.
I want you to know that.
But my training as a graduate student, I would say, is more interdisciplinary than the work that I've done here. I was involved in a project that was kind of at the nexus between geochemistry and biology and hydrology. So I have a minor in my PhD program that's hydrogeology. And since I've moved here, I've been more towards the biology end than the physical science end. I am not engaged in social science team work before, and that's what I'm really excited to learn more about. In terms of my involvement with stakeholders, I serve on the Jordan River Technical Advisory Committee along with Beth, and I've also served as a technical expert in reviewing the state of Montana's nutrient criteria development, and I'm now engaging in some technical advisement for a group of stakeholders in Colorado that are kind of environmental groups that are concerned with being able to rebut some claims that are being made against the nutrient criteria project that aren't founded in science. And so I'm trying to provide them some scientific content that they can use in rebutting those claims that are being made by the other stakeholders.
Cool. Well, with 3 minutes to go, I have two choices. I could tell you my little spiel, but I also want to hand something out. Let me have Lorian hand this out while I'm giving you my little spiel. What I'm handing out is a sign-up sheet for you to let me know when you're available to present to this group and what you might talk about. And what I'd like to do is sort of get all that without knowing. I don't want you to sign up for a particular date because I have to look at all the possibilities, and we'll try to coordinate people's schedules to fill all the slots. We've got a bunch of slots this fall, and this is where I'm hoping I can get, oops, well, I guess I lost the computer again. Okay, this is where I was trying to get on the screen. These are our dates when we have sessions. We've got the room reserved here, and they run up until December 10th, and then I've tentatively set aside time in early January because I think we'll have a hard time finishing in 7 sessions. I'm surprised, and people are very shy and don't want to talk, and we have no outside speakers. So think about these slots first, and then if we don't get you this fall, we'll reschedule some things in January as we need. And I'll probably put a couple people
and
together.
Then a copy of that.
Okay, so you got a copy of that so I can get away from this now? Mm-hmm. Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Muted.
And do we have to do this right here? Can we take it back to our office?
You can take it back to your office, but try to get it to me soon. If you have your schedule and you know your availabilities, then leave it with me today. And I will just give you the 2-minute version of Doug. I said I was a sociologist. I was trained in sociology, did a lot of agricultural work from the get-go. My statistics were all biostatistics by chance, and that has been very useful because I understand some of the language people use when they're describing experimental design. We don't train in that way. And so I worked on a lot of agronomy and entomology projects at my old school. I was a specialist in livestock agriculture. And so most of what I understood is how social and economic factors drive the behavior of livestock farmers and ranchers, and how their lives are like, and how to make sense of what's going on and what's changing there. And that quickly got into issues that had to do with environmental issues, because a lot of why we care about livestock agriculture in society is interest in trying to manage the environmental footprint of agriculture. And so I began to serve on teams, and my first team was the classic multidisciplinary team where they said, we're getting $700,000, we'll give you $14,000 if you will be on our grant. And give us your CV, and give us a couple paragraphs, and we'll submit it, because we're required to have a social scientist to apply for this project. And I was new, and I said, cool, $14,000, that's a lot of money. And so I did that, but then I looked around on that team as I began to operate, and we got more work done with the $14,000 than the guys did with the 650 some odd left. More impactful, because what we did is we went out and did on-farm research and learned some things that cast doubt on the whole rest of the project. And so it became very newsworthy, and the next time out we got a much bigger share of the budget, and I knew my partners well enough to know which partners to pick and which partners to avoid. And so I learned that, we can still do multidisciplinary research, but do it with people who are really buying into all the parts, and that's been a lot of what I've done since. So I studied nutrient cycling on dairy systems in the Midwest, and dietary projects as well with the livestock sector, but also when I moved here, I got involved with David Stevenson, Nancy and Jeff and Bethany and others on this project in the Little Bear, trying to understand the impacts of agriculture and conservation behaviors on water quality. And a lot of what my background has been is phosphorus and water quality and nutrients. I used to have an extension role, and my experience when we from that was that it's really important that we go out into the field and reality check our scientists with the real life experiences of the farmers. And by doing on-farm research with randomly sampled farms, which is kind of difficult but worthwhile, we learned all sorts of things about assumptions that were built into models that weren't actually right because they were based on real, well done, well collected data, and system properties that weren't included in the modeling of those systems. And I learned that in the Midwest. Well, I came out here and I learned that in the Little Bear as well, that there's a lot about that system that we don't, that the community that's developed the natural science and the engineering science could benefit from grounding themselves. So my stakeholder footprint has always been really more in trying to collect data alongside people who are the people doing the behaviors we care about, and learning from those interactions in formal and informal ways. And so I sell that model or promote that model quite a bit. All right, we're over time today. What I'm going to propose is that we spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes next time learning from people who aren't here yet but will be joining us, and talking a little bit about our expectations, because I haven't given you guys a chance to say anything about why you're here and what you expect to get out of this. And it probably is going to be very beneficial to all be clear that we're on. I was telling Lori earlier, I don't want this to be Doug's project that you kind of decide if you're going to be part of or not. It has to quickly develop a character in which I'm not up here. And we are talking a little bit about our project, and that means I have to be very open to your vision of what you want this project to be and not impose my vision of what I think this project should be. I'll try to keep the cats herded and keep us on task, and I will express my vision, because I do that. But I want to at least get a sense of where people want to go with this. And then I'll also schedule probably one speaker next time if there's a good volunteer. It could be me if there's no volunteer. But to get us started with this idea of using our slots to come hear some presentations, and then I think we'll evolve a set of questions and topics as we go into this that we'll begin to return to with each sets of speakers, as well as just getting clarification and probing on those speakers. So you guys are going to be most of the speakers. We have some money to bring outside speakers in from far away. I'm going to be continuing to try to contact people from what we'll call loosely the stakeholder community, because I only got licensed to do that a week ago, and so you guys, I called you a week ago and you're here, and I think that's great. There's other people I need to talk with and get involved and plugged into this process. But if you go along for the ride, I think as we go into the next few weeks, we'll get more and more into a rhythm, and hopefully you can make this part of your life this fall.
So, questions or concerns?
Is it fair to assume that when people are giving these presentations that they're not going to try and cover all of what they do, but more the things that they do that are directly related to the local area of this effort?
I think that's my assumption, is that we have to think about how to use 20 minutes effectively and for the purposes that we're here for. And that means, and I haven't thought it through, but things that obviously I would pick from if I were doing it that would speak to things I need to share with this group so that we can do the kind of planning and learning that I would like to see us do. And so I would probably focus on the parts of my work that's most germane to water management and environmental and ecological and hydrologic dynamics. And probably emphasize some of the work that I do that's social scientific as it bridges into some of the other boxes, because those who've worked with me, I tend to have lots of opinions about everyone's boxes on the research team, informed or ill-informed. They can talk to you about that later. But so somehow find that right little happy medium, and I think for different people it might look a little different, but definitely think about what piece of yourself you can share in that much time that would build this communication that I started the whole thing today with, that we're building communication this fall. We're trying to get to know each other in interesting ways. It's not always going to be efficient, but at the end of it, hopefully you'll know really where everyone's coming from and where you see yourself being part of a collective or collaborative enterprise. Michelle.
In biology, because we're such a diverse department, we have people who are gene jockeys and then people like me who don't study organisms. We've changed our format for our departmental seminars to try and increase people's attendance by making them TED Talks, if you've ever seen those on TV or on the computer, where it's just 15 minutes of somebody's kind of general overview and communicated in a way that anybody in biology should be able to understand, or anybody in water, social science, climate sustainability should understand. So maybe if we put that framework in our heads as we're preparing our slides.
Yeah. And if you don't understand, now's the time to ask. So that if there's language used or there's something confusing, that's kind of what I hope to get out of this a little bit, is I have some working knowledge of some of what you guys do, but I won't be shy about saying I actually don't know how you do that or where that came from or what you mean by something. And so hopefully by trying to become, there's a model, Michelle and I were at this meeting in Idaho together last week, and there's a sort of T model that they throw out there as training. Use it for training students. You want to train them as specialists, which would just be a column in a discipline, or horizontally as people who can bridge across disciplines. Well, many people like to recommend a T. So you have your strength, you have your specialization in the discipline you bring to the table, but you also build a explicit skill set to be able to talk at some level of depth, but not as a person who's going to get hired to do that discipline, across more than one disciplines. And that's the vocabulary learning that we'll be working on here, so that we get comfortable with just enough working knowledge to have some insights and suggestions, and to begin to blur those boundaries a little bit across who's the expert and who's the discipline and who's the what. Dorian?
Just as I've been thinking about this, as Doug has sort of explained the essence of this project, I think some of the things that would be kind of interesting, at least to start out discussions with, as you're presenting, is to, rather than just doing the general things, and I agree, making it an easier to understand, just sort of general, like why are you working on these things, what's the big picture, why are you doing it, but also to maybe go a little bit in depth in such things like what kinds of variables are you measuring, because I think, and how do you think about what you measure, because in terms of integrating your sciences, that's where some of those assumptions are going to come out and become more clear, where you say, wow, I've never thought about measuring water that way, or I've never thought about measuring this dynamic of a system. I measure it a totally different way, and I think there's some potentially really interesting conversations that come out of that sort of thing as well. So I think an important discussion to have next time will be what's a useful sort of framework for these presentations so that everyone's sharing similar kinds of information so you can talk about it later. And there are probably several components to that, but part of my role with this process, working with Doug and just being here in these meetings, will be to facilitate those conversations after the presentations. So hopefully that'll be fun. And I will also work really hard to keep us on time. So,
Which
I'll make this
on that
front. Right, and we actually only have the room and the recordings for a specific amount of time, so.
I don't know how to hit the button. There's no button on my screen.
Okay, maybe there's supposed to be a menu button or something?
Okay.
One way to get it to end.